So we have seen system of conservation laws, and a special case of system of conservation laws is a scalar conservation law, in which we have just one equation, whereas in a system we may have multiple equations, which is just denoted by p. We just gave the notation p, and p can be any natural number. So when p is 1, we have a scalar equation. And when p is greater than 1, we call that as a system. So all the equations which belong to this system are PDEs. So it's just a system of PDEs. So for that system, we saw what a classical solution will be. It is U vector, whereas for a scalar case, it's just U. So for this, we saw what a classical solution will be. That is, anything that satisfies the PDE and the initial condition. Also, we require this U vector to be continuous, and its derivatives also must be continuous. Only then we will be able to use it in the PDE, because PDE has dou U by dou T and dou F by dou X. So for that, we require the derivatives to be continuous, and essentially we require the existence of derivatives. So we require the derivatives to be nice as well, along with the niceness of U vector. So so that is what a classical solution is. However, U vector need not always be nice. The derivatives may not exist. In that cases, we constructed something known as weak solution. That is, weak solution is a solution to weak form of this system of PDEs that we are talking about. So we obtain the weak form by using something known as test function. So we multiplied the test function to the system, and then we integrated. We essentially did integration by parts. That is, we transferred the derivatives in U to the derivatives in phi. That is, we transferred the derivatives from one function to another function. Because the test function, let's call it phi. So this test function is nice. That is, it has derivatives and they exist, and the test function itself is smooth. So that function is nice. So when we multiply this function to the system and we do integration by parts, the derivatives get transferred from U to phi, and we also have an integration there. So that is the weak form of conservation law, and any solution that satisfies this weak form for all test functions possible is known as the weak solution. So we saw that we also saw piecewise smooth solutions. That is, there will be a discontinuity, and we have piecewise smoothness. That is, here we have a discontinuity in this region, whereas the solution is smooth to the left and right of this discontinuity. So here, in such cases, we saw what weak form will be. So then we also saw that not all weak solutions are physically relevant. Only certain weak solutions will be physically relevant. So for that, we constructed entropy solutions. So we saw various conditions known as entropy conditions for the scalar case, and we have been looking at it for the system where p is greater than 1. So for such a system, we have been constructing the entropy function. So any functions, or let's call it U, will be a function of U vector. Is an entropy function to the system if it is able to, first let me just write the system here. So this is our system of conservation law, a multi-dimensional system. We use S, right? So this is our system. So this system, let's say that we have some function U of U small u vector. This is the entropy. Such a function will be an entropy function if the following condition satisfies. That is, multiply U prime of U vector to the system. you have to multiply. Here you get. So this case, this will become vector. Let's here you will get u prime of u vector into rho by rho u vector of fj vector. Dot, you have a rho by rho x, okay? Let me write it here. And now this should be some entropy derivative of entropy flux function. Let's just call it fj. So u is a scalar function, okay? This is a scalar function of a vector. Depends whose domain is a vector. Similarly, the same for fj of u vector as well. So this is also a scalar function. So if such a thing holds, if we are able to write this whole thing as derivative of some function, then we'll get an additional conservation law. Now this along with this can be written as this is dou by dou u vector of fj, this is dou u vector by dou xj, so this becomes dou by dou xj of fj of u vector. So now this looks like a conservation law, right? So we call it as an additional conservation law. So and in this case, if such a thing happens, then u is an entropy function. That is, if this condition, if we are able to write this, then we have an additional conservation law, and in that case, your scalar function u of u vector is an entropy function to the system that you are talking about. So this is what an entropy function for a system of conservation laws is. And we stated a theorem that for an entropy function, u double prime of u vector dot after stating this, we stated a theorem that this has to be symmetric, right? U double prime of u vector dot fj prime has to be symmetric. Due to the vector. So this has to be symmetric. This condition is equivalent to saying that this condition is true. They are both, this and this are equivalent. We showed that for the existence of an entropy function, this is the necessary and sufficient condition, which means that for existence of entropy function, we require this. Also, before this, we stated that for existence of entropy condition, this has to be true. So these two conditions are equivalent. Okay. So this is what is an entropy function for a system of conservation law. Now, next, we have done all this with regard to the classical solution for the system. That is, we have considered the system of PDEs. We did not actually consider the weak form. Okay, we only talked about the PDEs, in which the derivatives u vector must exist. Derivatives of u vector must exist. So, this u vector now that we talked about is a classical solution to this system. So, all of this has been done for the system of PDEs. However, the reason for going about doing the entropy function is to identify which weak solutions are physical. However, we did not use any weak solution in the construction. We have used the classical solution to say what an entropy function will be. Now, with this idea, we'll move on to stating that when any weak solution will satisfy the entropy condition and when we can say that the weak solution is physical. So we have been looking at something known as the vanishing viscosity method, wherein we constructed another PDE. We considered some other PDE. Let's call it the epsilon viscous PDE. Okay, from now on. This is not some term which is commonly used, okay? Just to identify the equations, I'm calling it as the epsilon viscous PDE. So this is a PDE which is similar to the system of PDEs that we consider, but we have an additional term, additional viscous term over here. So we call it just the epsilon viscous PDE, and for this PDE again we had the initial condition. Then the viscosity term, which is epsilon Laplacian of U. Then we stated that we were looking at a theorem. We were halfway through this theorem actually. So let's say that one was our system, actual system. Okay, the actual system of PDE. Let's say that there exists an entropy function for the actual system of PDE. That is, this entropy function has been constructed using the classical solution, U vector, which when we say this implies this thing, okay? That U double prime of U dot Fj prime of U vector is symmetric. These two things are necessarily implied when we say that one admits an entropy function and entropy flux function. Then and for the new system that we consider, that is epsilon viscous PDE, these will be the sequence of smooth solutions. In the epsilon viscous PDE, we have something known as epsilon over here, but we do not actually give it a number. We just say that epsilon must be greater than 0 and it has to be small. We don't say how small it has to be, and we don't say what that number actually is. So for each epsilon that you can, there can be many epsilons that satisfy this condition. Okay. So for each of those epsilons, there will be a system. Okay. For each of the values of epsilon, say epsilon 1, 2, 3, we have different systems. So and there will be different solutions that satisfy each of these different systems. Okay. These are the solutions that satisfy the different systems. And with the first condition, say that when you say norm of a number, we have, when you say norm of vector epsilon, U vector epsilon has 3 components, okay? U1, I'll write epsilon at the top now. So this is U vector epsilon. And for different epsilons, we have different such vectors. Okay. Call it epsilon 1. Let's just name it epsilon k, like k is something greater than some natural number. Okay. I'm just using epsilon 1, 2, 3, etc. So I'll epsilon k over here. So this is your vector. Norm, and there are different types of norms possible. I'll just tell you what a Euclidean norm will be. That is, I'm just not writing epsilon k as the suffix right now. It will be quite confusing with a lot of symbols. So this is your Euclidean norm. That is summation k equals 1 to p UK square the whole power 1 by 2. This is 2 norm or Euclidean norm. We essentially call it L2 norm. We have LP norms as well. LP norms, like P is any num. P is anything greater than 0. That is, instead of 2 over here, I've used 2 P's, so that may be confusing. Let's just change this to Q, okay? LQ norm. Essentially, in most of the books, you'll find it as LP norm. I'm just using Q here because we already have used P for some other thing. So this definition will be something like this. Q to the power 1 by 3. This is the definition for LQ norm. So let's just generally we use only Euclidean norm or L2 norm, which is this. So if for any vector you can find such a norm. So the first condition that you are stating is this. This norm must be less than or equal to some constant for all epsilon k. That is, we can have many epsilons, right? So for all possible epsilons, this norm, the value of norm must be greater than that. I'll just say one nuance. Let's say we have different epsilons going up to epsilon infinity, because there can be many things possible. We have not stated how small epsilon has to be. Let's say epsilon is, let's say we just consider epsilon to be just less than 1. So in this case, epsilon will be lying between 0 and 1. So between 0 and 1, we have uncountably infinite numbers. So epsilon can have uncountably infinite. Epsilon can take uncountably infinite values. So you can't. Okay. So for each of these uncountably infinite values, although it's uncountable, I'm just writing few of those because we can't count and we can't just write them. However, I'm just writing them to demonstrate it over here. So each of the epsilons will be written, and let's say norm of u vector epsilon 1 is less than or equal to some C1, and this is less than norm of u vector epsilon 2 is less than or less than some C2. Okay. Less than or whatever. Yes. This is like C infinite. So if we are able to find some C which is the maximum or supremum of all of these C, then it's fine. However, if we are not able to find such a supremum, what if we are able to find, then it's fine. Okay. Otherwise, what if C1 less than C2 less than, it goes on up to C infinity. So what if this value of the epsilon keeps increasing, or then in that case you will not be able to find some epsilon, right? So let's say this C is the biggest. Again, you can find some other for a different. You can write epsilon infinity plus 1. This again is infinity only. However, this is not just this is not formal, quite formal. However, just to demonstrate, I'm showing this. Okay, this whatever C infinity plus 1 will be greater than this. You cannot bound. You cannot bound all the time. So since epsilon also has infinity of numbers, and if you are not able to find some common supremum like this among all the C supremums, among all these bounds, if you are not able to find a common maximum, then you're going to land into a problem. You'll not be able to find anything. So, that is why we put a condition. We say that exists. We say that it's possible to find a bound for all possible epsilon, a common bound for all epsilon. If, if this supremum of all bounds will obviously be maximum, because let's call this value supremum that you get for all the bounds as some m. So obviously all of your epsilon 1, everything, all of them will be, and so on. Each of these now will be bounded by m. So you'll know that each of the norms of u vector epsilon will be bounded by m for all epsilons possible. So you require that. That is some nuance that I am telling you. It's always good to go through the levels of understanding the smallest nuances possible. So that is what is given by this condition. So it's good to put a common bound for all epsilons. So we are putting it. We are just assuming that there exists some common bound for all the norms of u epsilon. Then we are putting another condition that u vector epsilon approaches u vector as epsilon approaches 0. That is, we told for each of the epsilons will have a different system of PDEs. So this system will then approach if epsilon approaches 0. Then your system of PDEs, let's say again, let's consider. Let me just call epsilon 1, epsilon 2, epsilon 3, and so on in the decreasing order. That is, epsilon 1 is greater than epsilon 2, and all of these are greater than 0. Let's just say this. So for this epsilon, you'll have a system of PDE along with some initial conditions, system and initial conditions. For this as well, you'll have the same thing, system with initial conditions. For each of the systems, each of the epsilons, you'll have different system and initial conditions. So as you move epsilon closer to 0, as epsilon goes closer to 0 in this direction, the systems that you have also should approach the actual system that we consider. That is the actual system of PDEs without epsilon, the original system that we started. And your u vector, the solution for each of these systems. Now each system and initial condition will have some solutions, right? And each of those solutions also must approach the actual solution to this actual system. We don't say that it should approach the classical solution, not the classical solution. It only approaches the weak solution. Because, you see, we only say that almost everywhere. That almost everywhere means that except at certain points in the domain x vector comma t, your u vector epsilon approaches u vector, except at certain points. So, which means that let's say you have some test function. So phi t u vector. Instead, let me call this as v vector. Okay. V vector equals u vector almost everywhere. This is the definition for v vector. And u vector is a different thing. U vector is different from v vector, okay? Because we have this thing called almost everywhere. So except at certain points, v vector equals u vector. So now for this function, if you have a test function, multiply it by test function, do integration by parts, you'll get something like this. So this is integral phi t into u vector will be equal to integral phi t into v vector, because on v vector and u vector are equal except at certain points, and those discrete points do not contribute to integration. So this is equal. So this way we say that this v vector is a weak solution to your actual conservation law. So that is what this means. So, so if we have all these assumptions, then u vector is a weak solution to 1, and also u vector satisfies the entropy condition, which is this. Here again, in the sense of distributions again, this is a PDE, an inequality in unequal PDE. Okay. It's a partial differential inequality. So if you again multiply this inequality with respect to a test function, multiply this inequality by a test function, do integration by parts, then you get a weak form of this inequality, and that is this one. So this u vector is a weak solution, and it also satisfies this weak form. So let me now go through the proof. That is, we basically saw the inequality last time, like how we got the inequality and all. So this u is a scalar entropy function, and it's a C2 function because we do double derivative, right? U prime, u double prime, and all are done. So it's always a C2 function. So let's just multiply u prime of u vector epsilon to the epsilon discussed PDE. Then you get something like this. Then this has been expanded over here. We saw this the simplification last time, and we made an argument that this term, we found this one. That is, we have found this expression, and we made an argument that this is always greater than or equal to 0, because we consider the function u of u vector epsilon to be convex. We usually consider the entropy function to be convex, because if it is convex, then u double prime of u vector epsilon will be positive semi-definite if it is convex. If or if it is strictly convex, then you'll have positive definiteness here. That is positive definite or positive semi-definite means this only actually. Any vector you take from Rp, if you do this dot product, then you have greater than 0 for positive definite and greater than or equal to 0 for positive semi-definite. So these are the conditions. So if you take u vector epsilon to be a convex or strictly convex function, you will end up having either of these conditions accordingly. So if you notice in this expression, we have this is similar to W transpose dot U double prime dot W. Okay. So for any W in Rp, if this holds, then it obviously will hold for this vector, which is dou U vector epsilon by dou Xk, which this also belongs to Rp. in this vector that we have. So if it holds for any W vector, it will hold for this specific vector as well. So this vector is, this term is now greater than or equal to 0 because of the convexity of our entropy function. So that is why we get this inequality. If this is greater than or equal to 0, you subtract some positive quantity from anything, then the new quantity that you obtain will always be less than or equal to than the old quantity. So that is why you get this inequality. So this equality that you have had over there has been transferred into this inequality now. So just a minute. So that is how we got this inequality. So now with this inequality, let's move on to seeing how the u vector epsilon approach the u vector, which is the weak solution for the weak form of actual conservation law. So we have taken all of these u vectors to be a sequence of smooth solutions. We started with that assumption, and those satisfy 1 and 2. So this, right? We consider two assumptions. This and this. So because of those two conditions, those two assumptions, we have this. That is u vector epsilon approaches u vector as epsilon approaches 0 in the sense of distribution. I've showed you previously that how in the sense of distribution means actually this. Okay, that is integral phi t into u vector equals integral phi t into v vector, where v vector, I told you, is equal to u vector almost everywhere except at certain discrete points. So if u vector epsilon approaches u vector in the sense of distribution, then of course dou u vector epsilon by dou t will also approach dou u vector by dou t in the sense of distribution. So if this is true, then yes, we'll have something like this: phi t into we said that u vector epsilon approach u vector almost everywhere. This implies that dou by dou t of u vector epsilon will also approach dou by dou t of u vector almost everywhere, but not necessarily at all points, but almost everywhere. So this also satisfies this weak form only, not the strong form. And this is something that involves a lot of real analysis and functional analysis, etc. This too. This doesn't come usually, they don't elaborate this in textbooks as well. This part even I'm not aware of. So, but yes, we'll try to get to know about this later. Even if things are out of scope for now, we just keep exploring, right? So, basically u vector epsilon approaches u vector almost everywhere. So from this we got this. Okay. And this one has been obtained from the condition that norm of u vector epsilon is less than or equal to c for all epsilon. From this condition, using this they have obtained this. Like, using this and this thing has been obtained. But this involves a lot of work actually. So let's just take it for granted right now that using these two assumptions, this can be obtained. So the first two terms, that is, so now we've seen that if this can be obtained, then obviously this can be obtained, right? This also approaches dou by dou xj of fj vector of u vector. So just with these two assumptions, it is these two assumptions, we go about showing that this is true and this is true. So as epsilon approaches 0 in the epsilon viscous PDE, we get the actual PDE itself, but in the sense of distribution. The actual PDE is not obtained at all points, but the actual PDE is obtained almost everywhere, but not at all points. So as epsilon goes to 0 in the epsilon viscous PDE, we approach the actual PDE almost everywhere. That is why we call it in the sense of distribution. So similarly, now we make a similar argument on entropy function. It is dou by dou t u of u vector epsilon approaches therefore dou by dou t of entropy function of actual conservation law. Similarly, entropy flux function of the epsilon viscous PDE approaches the entropy flux function of actual conservation law almost everywhere. All of this happens almost everywhere, but not at all points. So just notice that. And also if epsilon approaches 0, then obviously epsilon Laplacian of u also approaches 0. So hence, this inequality, the new inequality that we derived over here, the equation A, transforms into something like this, in the sense of this is true almost everywhere, but not at all points, which means this is true in its weak form. That is, we derived it, we have shown its weak form, right? This integration of the equality becomes greater than or equal, less than or equal to becomes greater than or equal to in the weak form, because when we do integration by parts, we get a negative sign. So because of that, when we move the negative sign to the other side, we get a greater than or equal to. So the inequality reverses. So in the weak form, the inequality reverses. So this is the strong form, but it's true only almost everywhere, not at all points. So an equivalent of this is the weak form of the entropy inequality. So if you notice now, we have obtained an entropy inequality by using the epsilon viscous PDE. So all solutions of epsilon viscous PDE satisfy this entropy inequality. This one, equation 8. So that way, and also we showed that all solutions of epsilon viscous PDE approach the weak solutions of original PDE that we considered. So we have two things right now. Solutions of classical solutions of epsilon viscous PDE satisfy the entropy inequality, and all classical solutions of epsilon viscous PDE approach the weak solution of original PDE. So we have two things right now. So by making these arguments that all of these derivatives approach, all of the derivatives in epsilon viscous PDE approach the derivatives in actual PDE. It is we made all these arguments, right, that the derivatives approach these things. That is these arguments. This will now help us to link the actual, epsilon viscous PDE with the weak form of original PDE and the weak form of entropy equation for the original PDE. So epsilon viscous PDE, so all classical solutions of epsilon viscous PDE somehow approach the weak solutions of original PDE. So this is what is the takeaway from all these arguments that we have made till now. So We have had this observation that any solution to Epsilon viscous PDE satisfies the entropy inequality and not the entropy equality. So, and also usually any physical solution, like um, any physics-based proper physical solution will have dampening. The solutions will keep dampening over time and not keep blowing up. So, having that as a criterion, uh, so usually this viscous term, we write it on the right hand side usually, okay? If, okay, let's not talk about that. So this epsilon, if it is positive, then the solutions dampen, and if epsilon is negative, the solutions blow up. So this is some physical argument that has been used in most of the texts. So with this argument, that is epsilon being positive for dampening of solution. And by considering that all physical solutions dampen, we take any solution for the epsilon viscous PDE to be the physically relevant solution. So because of this reason, we say that this entropy inequality has to be satisfied. Okay, so let me summarize this. All classical solutions of epsilon viscous PDE approach the solution of I'll call it the epsilon viscous entropy inequality. Which is this one, okay? Equation 8, and the weak form of it is, sorry. Which is this one, okay? This equation. In terms of epsilon, we have everything in terms of epsilon. So all classical solutions of epsilon viscous PDE satisfy this epsilon viscous entropy inequality. However, last class we saw that all classical solutions of original PDE satisfy the entropy equality and not entropy inequality. But now we have seen that all classical solutions of epsilon viscous PDE satisfy the epsilon viscous entropy inequality. And also we have seen that all classical solutions of epsilon viscous PDE approach weak solutions of original PDE as epsilon goes to 0. So now we have these three takeaways. These are the takeaways from arguments from what we've seen till now. So usually now let's go to the argument that I was making. So by root u vector epsilon plus summation. This is the epsilon viscous PDE. I've written it over here. Let me write it this way. Take that viscous term to the right hand side. This was our PD, right? So this is, let's just consider it as some general system of PDEs. Now, this is one system of PDE with a right-hand side term, along with the derivative in time, flux term. This is the conserved variable vector. This is the flux vector, flux term, and this is the diffusion term. So usually if epsilon is greater than 0, you have proper diffusion. The solutions won't blow up. The actual the system is stable. If your epsilon is negative, no diffusion. Negative diffusion will result in instability. So we consider this to be physical and this to be non-physical. So that way, because this is physical, we consider this part of the system. And what we are trying to do is to get the physically relevant solutions out of the weak solution. So we have only construct when epsilon is greater than 0, things are physical. So anything that is, any solution that is physical will satisfy the epsilon viscous entropy inequality. So all classical solutions of epsilon viscous PDE satisfies the epsilon viscous entropy inequality. So we consider any solution that satisfies this system as a physical solution. That is where epsilon is greater than 0. And such solutions always satisfy the epsilon viscous entropy inequality. So that is our final takeaway. Out of these, this is the final takeaway. That is, any physical solution, any physically relevant solution satisfies the entropy inequality for the original system of PDE. So, with this being the final takeaway, we'll make some arguments right now. We'll try to define what an entropy solution is. Now we have just understood, so let's just define what a physically relevant entropy solution is. We have seen classical solution and we have seen weak solution. Now let's define an entropy solution by considering all the information that we have till now. So a weak solution, this is our system, right? 1 and 2. This is the original system, and 1 is the original system and 2 is our initial condition. So a weak solution for this system is called as an entropy solution if U vector satisfies this inequality for all possible entropy functions of this. We talked what an entropy function is last time. That is, any function for which, any function U for which U double prime of U vector dot Fj prime of U vector is symmetric, provided U is convex. Okay, U must be convex. We saw the significance of having U convex, right? Now in the derivation of vanishing viscosity. Because of this convexity, we were able to get the inequality by arguing that W transpose dot U double prime dot W will be greater than or equal to 0. So convexity plays a role there. So we take all entropy functions to be convex, that is all U to be convex, and any function is known as entropy function if this condition is satisfied. So for all such functions that satisfy this condition that I've written over here, and for all test functions possible, if this inequality is satisfied, then that solution U vector is known as the physically relevant solution or entropy solution. We call that as the entropy solution. Any entropy solution is physically relevant solution. So this is how we determine physically relevant solution out of all possible weak solutions. Here, this is just an initial condition, okay? When you do integration by parts, you get this term and you get a term with just initial condition. So this is just that. So this is some inference. Next is some inference with respect to piecewise P1 functions. These are also weak solutions. These are some specific forms of weak solutions, right? A weak solution can in general be anything. But a piecewise P1 function of U vector, which is piecewise continuous, is also a weak solution. So we call such a function as an entropy solution if these three conditions are satisfied. That is, the big condition that we have told here has been simplified and written over here for some specific form of function known as piecewise continuous function of U. For this thing, anything is called as an entropy. Any such piecewise continuous function is an entropy solution if that solution is a classical solution on either side of the discontinuity. That is, if you have piecewise P1 function, which means that you have a discontinuity and you have and your solution U vector is continuous. That is, derivatives exist over here. Okay. On either side, only along the discontinuity your derivatives don't exist. So in this region, you require your U vector to be a classical solution to the PDE, and along the discontinuity, you require satisfaction of Rankine-Hugoniot conditions, and you require satisfaction of this dump inequality. That is, this big inequality has been simplified into the small one for this piecewise P1 function. This is actually the same thing, that is speed of discontinuity. This is similar to the Rankine-Hugoniot conditions that we have derived last time. That was speed into, this actually was speed into, let me write this, difference in U vector V equal to difference in when I write something in box, it means that difference in U vector across the discontinuity. If, let's say, if your value is UL here, UR here, so this term is now written as UR minus UL. Okay, this is now FJL minus FJR. So this is the speed of the discontinuity. So we require these three conditions to be satisfied to say that U vector is an entropy solution for 1 and 2. So this is just some specific information obtained from this general definition. Okay, this general definition is common for all possible solutions, weak solutions of U vector. This specific information is only for piecewise continuous weak solutions. So when your weak solutions are piecewise continuous, it's okay to see only these conditions. Whereas if it is not piecewise continuous, then you have to see this general overall picture, this one. Okay. So any doubts?
No, ma'am. No doubts.
Okay. So, can we start a new topic or topic here? So it would be nice if you guys could go through these things, right? And come back probably next week sometime. We can have a discussion. I think now we have finished entropy solution thing. So it would be nice to have a discussion at this point so that we can clarify all the doubts and then move to Riemann problems and all. Like there you'll have you might have come across Riemann problems. So the shock tube problems and all you would have heard, right? Have you heard of shock tube problems?
I don't think I've heard of it.
Okay.
Oh yeah, we haven't, I guess.
Okay. So yeah, let's introduce that next time. Let me just say what a shock tube problem actually is. So in 1D, you have a shock tube. You have a tube, okay? And you have some diaphragm, which is some separation. And you have a physical state. Basically, some high pressure on one side and low pressure on other side. A constant, you have constant rho u c. And on the other side, you have a different constant. Let's say rho L, UL, PL, and rho R, UR, PR. And when you rupture this diaphragm, you will develop, you see expansion waves, shock waves, and contact discontinuities developing in this shock tube, and in this tube actually. So that is what is the shock tube problem. So an equivalent of this is the Riemann problem. It has many variations. You have expansion, shock, and contact discontinuities developing. So next class is Riemann problem will be coming as an example for one system of equations. Do you see a linear system of hyperbolic equations with constant coefficients next time? And then we'll move to nonlinear system later. So Riemann problem will be coming as an example of this. So we'll see the solutions for the Riemann problem. We'll see how the solutions for Riemann problem come from whatever we have learned till. If you've learned, like in 1D, for 1D scalar case, we have studied shock and expansion, basically. So we'll see how these can come up there for a system. Okay. So, any doubts?
I don't have any doubts right now.
Okay. So, it would be nice if you could go through these contents. Basically, the entropy thing specifically. Okay.
Yeah,
Do you
sure.
have any?
Start.
Okay. And do you have any feedback regarding the lectures? Is it okay to tell now, or do you want to write to me? Anything is fine. So I'll stop recording.